Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. Glad you're with us tonight. We're talking about preserving historic buildings, historic spots in Nashville. Talking about the Nashville Nine. That is a list of endangered historic buildings or spots in Nashville as put together by Historic Nashville. And we have board president Brian Mansfield with Historic Nashville here, kind of going over the list, this year's list of endangered locations. And we've hit several of them. But I'm just going to go to the next one. The Elks Lodge on Jefferson Street. What's the situation with that?
This is actually one that we learned about from a News Channel 5 story, because the building was damaged in the tornado back in March 2020, but it wasn't the kind of damage that was obvious from the street. And so I think a lot of people just had no clue that that it had been damaged and that damage hadn't been fixed. A tree fell on it, and so there's like a roof leak and water got in and there's water damage, and it's just an old building anyway, so there's a lot of upkeep that needs to be done. So the concern with the Elks Lodge is not that somebody wants to tear it down. The concern is that it just needs fixing. It needs money to fix the roof, to fix the plumbing, to fix the water damage. But it's also a very important building for a couple of reasons in this city's history. I mean, and it's really got sort of two separate histories that people care about it for. And it's one of my favorite spots in all of Nashville because I'm a big music nerd. And it is one of the last standing places in Nashville that we can place Jimi Hendrix when he lived in the area.
Oh, wow. And that's the mural, right? On the side of the building. I think we can show it again. There's a big mural there on the side of the building of Jimi Hendrix. It says, look, a duel between Jimi Hendrix and local blues guitarist Johnny Jones. That's the mural you see there. Yes.
And so this building has been the Elks Lodge since 1968, so it's a very important place to the community in the Jefferson Street area. But before that, it was a venue called Club Barron. And Club Barron was one of the most popular clubs to play in the Jefferson Street area in the 1950s and into the early to mid 60s. And they booked Muddy Waters and Etta James and Little Richard and Fats Domino and B.B. King, and Jimi Hendrix was in the area. He played at a different club more often, but the story goes that one night Jimmy's heard about this guy named Johnny Jones, who's really hot stuff, playing over at Club Barron, and so he wants to go see how he measures up. And so Jimmy and Johnny Jones get into this guitar battle on stage, which Jimmy ends up losing, partly because he's still figuring out how to be Jimi Hendrix, but also because Johnny had a much better amplifier, so he could play louder. But that is, that has become part of the Jimi Hendrix legend, especially as it relates to Nashville. And most of the other places that Jimmy was known to either live or hang out, most of those got torn down when I-40 came through. And so if you're like standing on, I'm not sure which ramp it is, but if you're standing on one of the ramps for I-40 at Jefferson Street, you're standing in the place where Jimi Hendrix's apartment was.
Wow.
But there's very little of that left, and that's about the only site where you can go, we know that Jimi Hendrix was here.
Well, then that's pretty important. And Ray Charles and others. I mean, there's so many that were there, and that's a shame. There's I guess, a leaky roof, and the building's in that kind of danger.
Yeah, and so really what that needs is an influx of cash. That needs somebody that just goes, it needs a good fundraiser. It needs, a patron to come in and just go, I want to make sure that this building stays. And it is, in some ways, it's the simplest fix of all of these, because the only thing that it needs is the money to get stuff done.
Well, let's hope that by highlighting it, by putting it on your list, that begins that. And all right, big picture, you're a historian and a music historian in Nashville. Do you think, this is a hard question, Nashville highlights the historical significance of Jefferson Street enough? What could we do to do a better job of highlighting that remarkable history that unfolded on Jefferson Street?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know that I am the best person to answer that question. I know that there are efforts to make the history of North Nashville and the Black community and the civil rights story in Nashville, to give it more prominence than it has ever had. I don't have a good big picture answer for how to do that on a scale that brings the attention of the rest of the country and the rest of the world to that the way that they already look at country music. But I definitely would like to see that happen more. That's a lot easier to do with the old Club Baron building there than it is if it gets so run down that it has to come down.
So let's hope that building is saved. Okay, that's the Elks Lodge on Jefferson Street. That is on your list of endangered places. All right, let's go to another one on your list. Southern Ground, which is 114 17th Avenue South. Southern Ground. There it is. Why is it on the list?
It's bottom line, it's on the list because it's on Music Row and it's on the market. And once something changes hands on Music Row these days, all bets are off. It is a wonderful recording studio. Zach Brown bought it about a decade ago, did an amazing job inside that place. It is a beautiful, beautiful facility. Big studios like that aren't exactly in vogue the way they were a decade or 20 or 30 years ago, or closer to 60 when Fred Foster started at his Monument Records studio. We are hoping that nothing bad will happen to that place, that the new owners will come in or whoever buys it will come in and go, we want to keep this just like it is because it's a great place. But as you've seen on Music Row the last 5 years, once you get a new owner, there's no telling what's going to happen. And
what makes it endangered is the fact that it's for sale. And when it goes for sale, whoever buys it, they can do maybe whatever they want with it. I mean, there's not a lot stopping them. If somebody wants to buy it and tear it down, that can happen. Is that right, or am I not right?
Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much what happens. And the land in that part of town is so valuable these days that it's more valuable than almost any kind of business the Nashville music industry could put in that place. I mean, one of the reasons the music industry started in that place was because it was an economically depressed area back in the 50s and early 60s. It's not that now. And so people are paying exorbitant prices for property, for perfectly good facilities, and then tearing them down and building really big, tall, multi-use complexes there.
And we don't need more of those. We need to keep on to this other stuff.
We might need more of those. I mean, we're growing really fast, but I would really rather them not go into places that have history that goes back to the late 1800s as a church building and goes back to the 60s as a recording studio where Chris Christopherson and Larry Gatlin and the Allman Brothers and Zach Brown Band and all sorts of people have recorded.
So interesting. Okay, yeah, Zach Brown Band, Casey Musgraves, Dwight Yoakam, Megadeth, it says, Foo Fighters, all kinds.
Yeah.
So it's that's very
and that's really just in the time that Zach Brown owned it. I mean, you go back when it was Monument Records, most of those acts that were on Monument in the late 60s and early 70s, they recorded those albums there. Most of the early Gatlin Brothers hits were recorded there. Chris Christopherson's early albums were recorded there. Tom T. Hall's Homecoming, which is a classic country record, was recorded there. Sammy Smith's Help Me Make It Through the Night was recorded there. And you know, in any other city in the country other than maybe New York and LA, if you had a recording studio with that kind of history, nobody would go near that. That would be, you know, I mean, it would be a shrine. And here it's just another studio to people sometimes.
All right, so that is Southern Ground on 114th, 17th Avenue South. The next one I want to go to, the Coca-Cola bottling plant on 1525 Church Street. There is the picture of it. That's the Coca-Cola bottling plant. Why is this on the list?
Primarily because of the way that the city is, the direction in which the city is growing right now. So if you look at the development that's going on in the last couple of years, we've jumped the interstate loop and are now expanding beyond that. So some of that's going up Music Row, some of that is going out the West End Church Street corridor. One of our structures last year that we put on the list was the Firestone Building, which is at the corner of West End and Elliston Place, right there before Centennial Park. And that building is in the process, that corner is in the process of going away. And there's going to be a building that's 26 or so stories that's going in there, which means that we will have buildings that are more than 24 stories high right next to Centennial Park all the way to downtown. The Coca-Cola bottling plant is in that corridor. It is a property that has been underutilized for years. Some people, old timers like me, will remember it as the old Jim Reed showroom. And
oh wow, the old Jim Reed.
Yeah.
That's the car dealership. Is that right?
Yeah.
The old.
Yeah,
that was the. Okay, that's interesting.
After the bottling plant, it was the Jim Reed showroom, and but there really hasn't been very much in that space for the last 20 or 25 years. Nobody's really figured out something to do with it. Buildings that you can't figure out something to do with in this town tend to go away.
It's a beautiful building, but if no one can figure out what to do with it, what do you feel obligated to recommend something? I mean, when I say you, the historic, what does Historic Nashville recommend something, or what do you think?
Well, not necessarily. I wish that we were a big enough organization in terms of membership and finances, and also in terms of political clout, to be able to come in and say, here's the business plan for the structure as is. We do not have that. Really, what we are doing is more bringing attention to a building that you may drive by every day and not even think about, and certainly not think about the history of. And so we are recommending more creative uses of the existing structures, but we don't, we are not the business owners that come in and go, we could put a club here, we could put shops here, we could,
But what a beautiful building. I mean, as you see that picture, I do hope that it is saved, because it is unique, it does have character, and that's what we're trying to preserve. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back, continue the discussion. Be back right after this.